The diencephalon is part of the brain that is made up of course, a number of different structures, and we're going to talk about three of those: the pineal gland, the thalamus, and the hypothalamus. As soon as you hear thalamus, I want you to remember forever, switchboard for incoming sensory information, except for the sense of olfaction. Your sense of smell gets routed right off to the olfactory cortices for processing. We're also going to talk about the hypothalamus, which is going to be the main control center for your viscera. There's the pineal gland, that little purplish gland that's marked at the posterior aspect, just inferior to the posterior aspect of the corpus callosum. Remember the corpus callosum? Oh, good, my cursor works. Is this bridge of white matter, and that bridge of white matter is going to interconnect the two hemispheres. This guy is the pineal gland. Just for some landmarks, this is the cerebellum. Here's the hypothalamus, which we're going to be talking about. Here's the pituitary, which is actually connected to the hypothalamus. Remember that. And this guy right here, this egg-shaped structure, is going to be the thalamus. So, the pineal gland is an endocrine gland. It secretes melatonin, which is a hormone. And as soon as you hear hormone, think part of the endocrine system. So sure enough, even though this little gland is located within the brain and therefore is considered part of the nervous system, it's actually an endocrine gland. It will regulate sleep-wake cycles, how you respond to changing amounts of daylight and darkness, and your reproductive functions. The thalamus, again, switchboard for incoming sensory information. It filters a lot of that information, and only a small percentage of that is going to be passed on for processing. If you remember when we talked about the major functions of the nervous system and what we do with information, you'll realize that that is going to be important. So the three things that we can do with information are: 1, act on it. 2, save it for later use. 3, ignore it. One of the reasons we ignore a lot of information is because the thalamus says, not important. We don't have to act on it. There you go. And each area of the thalamus is going to be connected to specific areas in the cortex. So it'll be sending information to specific areas of the cortex. Specific areas of the thalamus will send information to specific areas of the cortices. The hypothalamus is going to be important because it's associated with homeostasis, but don't tell me that on a test. You need to tell me more detail. So it's really, really, really important for controlling and integrating all sorts of information and causing some sort of effect. How do you stimulate it? You might get sensory information from the cerebrum or the brainstem or the spinal cord. It might be stimulated by changes in composition of your cerebrospinal fluid or the fluid in the body, interstitial fluid, or chemicals that are circulating in the blood. So there is no blood-brain barrier associated with the area of the hypothalamus. What is known as the infundibulum is going to connect the pituitary to the hypothalamus. So I think I use this. In fact, I remember talking about this, I think in a lecture, one of the classes that we had. If you've seen the movie The Wizard of Oz, when Dorothy and her friends get to Oz, they go to see the wizard, and there's this giant head on a screen being scary and all-powerful. And in actuality, there's this little guy behind the curtain pulling levers. The pituitary is perceived as the master gland of the endocrine system. And in actuality, it is the hypothalamus that is going to control the pituitary and so much else of the body. So I use the Wizard of Oz as an analogy for the relationship between the pituitary, which is supposed to be the master gland of the endocrine system, and the hypothalamus, which is really the master gland of the endocrine system. Because look at what it does. It's going to regulate heart rate and blood pressure, body temperature, water and electrolyte balance, control of hunger and body weight, control of digestive movements and secretions, regulation of sleep-wake cycles, and it is going to control endocrine system functioning. So you need to be able to tell me 3 or 4 of those if you are asked to give functions of the hypothalamus. Do not write down it controls homeostasis or its function of the hypothalamus is homeostasis. That tells me nothing. You need to be specific. Let me repeat that. You need to be able to rattle off 3 or 4 of these functions of the hypothalamus, not just tell me that it controls homeostasis. That's not detailed enough. I love the hypothalamus. It's totally cool. And this shows you the thalamus and the hypothalamus.